Hey everybody, and welcome to another Interstellar Model. This is now part 3 of my Bandai Y-Wing build. Alright, so obviously the kit you see in the background is not the Bandai kit. This is rather a US Aerospace ground equipment set. It's 172 in scale, and this is what's going to make up our ground crew. Alright, so as you saw with the Y-Wing pilot, there were several steps that I took to detail and paint him. And as I said, I'm going to follow those same steps here. And I do want to mention these are very basic steps. I don't want to imply that this is all that you can do to detail your figures. As the figures get larger in particular, there are a whole host of other things you can do to make your figures even more detailed. Alright, so go ahead and begin. I'm going to start with applying the base colors, which are essentially the colors you're using, the basic colors you're using for the figure. And if you recall from the movie, the ground personnel wore these gray uniforms, so we don't have to stray too far from the primer color here. So I'm going to use Vallejo's light gray for that, and then we'll move on to the skin tones and then apply the darker colors. Okay, and here we're going to have the completed ground crew, and after the wash I did decide to add some highlights. So I don't know if you can tell, but what I did was I took a light gray paint and touched it to various areas on the figure. So for example here along the pockets, anywhere that there's relief sticking towards us. And so for example you can see here on the pants, and also evident along here as well. So again, it's supposed to essentially mimic light bouncing off, or enhancing the light bouncing off the figure to provide more contrast versus the shadows and darker areas that you see. So again, I'm really happy with the way these are turning out. I definitely have more practice with figures, but on the other hand, I think this is much better than I've ever done in the past. So just follow the steps, make sure you have some fine brushes. And by the way, toothpicks too are helpful. If you saw, I was using a toothpick to apply color to the headphones. All you need is a tiny, tiny drop of paint, and sometimes a brush just can't quite cut it. So toothpicks have been very helpful as well. Alright, so now it's time to move on to the ground equipment. Alright, so as you can see, this set comes with various pieces of equipment, and based on a friend's recommendation, and I know I've mentioned his name before, his name's Mark Fraley. He was in the Air Force for many years, and he's worked with a lot of different type of aircraft equipment. And so I asked him what his suggestion would be, and he picked out the hydraulic test stand and the generator set, so that's what I'm going to go with. Alright, so here we have the parts of those pieces of equipment, and what I plan to do is to make the equipment look worn. And the same friend of mine, Mark, had been watching Force Awakens recently, and he noted that a lot of the Rebels repair equipment was yellow in color. So I think that'd be a good choice here, because it's going to add some color to the diorama or the display itself. Everything so far has been gray. And it's also going to be able to highlight the rust effect that I'm going to go after here. So essentially the process is going to be applying, well actually this has already been primed. We're going to go ahead and apply Tester's Rust as that brownish color, and then I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to it as well, and add a different layer just to add some variation. After that is dried, we're going to go ahead and apply the salt technique. I think that's going to give us more of the effect we're after here versus using the masking fluid. If you recall, the salt technique gives us a bit more stippled appearance, and that's what I'm after here. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so here we have the two pieces assembled now, and you can also see that I've added just a little bit more rust brown, just with a brush dabbing it on there just to give some texture. And so now we are ready to apply the salt. If you're putting this together, actually it's perfectly fine to just assemble it and then paint it. That's probably what I should have done. I just wasn't sure. Alright, so let's go ahead and move forward. What I'm going to do next is actually apply some hairspray. Now you can actually use water if you want, but I'm going to go ahead and use hairspray. That's what I've used in the past. It tends to adhere the salt pretty well to our surface there. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so for the hairspray, you can get this stuff pretty cheap at the drugstore, and I've just sprayed it into a little bottle like this, and I'm going to go ahead and brush it onto each of the surfaces here, and then we'll sprinkle on the salt. Right, now the stepladder did not come with the set. My friend Mark was kind enough to send it to me to include in my display here. So what I'm going to do is a little different here. I painted the base color black and added some rust color here and there. And we're going to use a salt technique for this as well. Let's see how this turns out. Alright, so here we now have the finished pieces. I'm very pleased with the way everything turned out. This is a very easy technique, as you saw, to create a worn, weathered look, and it is certainly something that you can apply to your fighter as well in place of using the masking fluid. So one thing I like about this technique is it leaves a finer dot-like stippled appearance here because you have these grains of salt that are adhering to the surface, and when removed, you have these dot imperfections now. I combined this along with a wash to bring out some of the other detailing, as well as using the Tamiya weathering kit to dirty up the tires and provide a bit more grime here along the corners. Also, you can see the kit comes with this accessory here, which are made up of different gauge wires, really. And this one in particular used this beige one here combined with this black stuff. You just kind of wrap it around and you curl it in this fashion. It was a bit of a challenge to get it to sit right. The wires had a tendency to pop up off the surface, but I eventually stabilized it with using super glue so they won't move. Lastly, I wanted just to show you another peek at the ladder here, and you can see combining different colors gives us the illusion of rust, and of course that salt technique, very effective at exposing the undercoat. Alright, so we're done with this here now. Let's go ahead and move on to the rest of the display base. Okay, so the display base itself is going to be made up of this piece here, first of all, that I got from Michaels. It has an area here to include some wiring, so I plan to actually incorporate some lighting. Covering this will be this styrene plastic from Evergreen Scale Models. This is 1.0mm thickness plastic, and since it does cover the entire base, I've already traced an outline. We're going to leave a seam in the middle, and we need to cut this out, and I will then adhere it onto here. And what I'll do is get you caught up with me here in just a second. I'm going to go ahead and work on some stuff, and then I will show you more plans of what I have in mind. Right, so here we have a slide from the movie, and you can see the Y-wing being worked on. So that is the plan, of course, is to have the figures surrounding the Y-wing along with the equipment. Drawing your attention towards the bottom of the picture, though, you'll see these 4 triangular-shaped light fixtures. So I'm going to have to fashion something to replicate those. My plan is just to cut some styrene plastic and come up with something that looks somewhat similar. Okay, so you can see I've created 3 light fixtures here. This was just made with styrene plastic. I first started out with cutting some triangular pieces to function for the sides here, and then a rectangular piece that was glued in between. Also took the liberty of just decorating them a little bit more because they just look so plain. I decided to take some strips and just kind of create a little bit of detailing there. And so these will serve as the cover for our lights, which we're going to be using now, these chip size SMDs. These are warm white in color, and since we are working with such a small confined space, these will work perfectly for that. Right, so the idea is to have the lights positioned kind of like this, with the fighter in this direction. And we're going to have ground equipment position 1 on each side with the ground crew. To finish off the light fixtures, I do need to create some covers for them, so I'm going to make that out of clear styrene and frost those over to help with light diffusion. Now obviously the lights need to be wired into a power source, so I think what I'm going to use is a 3-volt battery because of the space restrictions we have here. I could use a 9-volt, but I really want to make a self-contained display, and at least with a 3-volt we can hide it underneath the display. As for the switch, I want to try to make that part of the display, so I'm going to use a push-button switch like I've used many times in the past, and maybe position that on top of a crate or something I can fashion for this corner here, possibly. So I'm still working the details of that out. Okay, so I'm continuing to work on the seam here. It's actually been a bit over a week that I've been able to do anything with this project, as I've just been so occupied at work, but I am now moving forward. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and provide this update for you here right now, end this video, and continue on with the next one, where we will complete the project. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me here on my YouTube channel or at interstellarmodeler@gmail.com. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.